Hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Lamar Darnell Shields.
We're going to do that again one more time, sound bombing communities. And that is the breath of life. We do that to say that we are here, and I am here live, coming through your speaker, coming through your phone, coming through your radio, coming through whatever device you're using. This is Lamar Shields, and I'm so grateful and honored that you decided to join me. Out of the million of podcasts that exist out there, you decide to hang out with me in the BalmShelter. And I'm not going to waste your time, because I believe, like what Samuel Jackson said in the movie Changing Lanes to Ben Affleck, can you give me my time back? And I don't want to waste your time. And if you were here the last time, you heard Melissa Da Silva, great coach and therapist out of Rhode Island. Wow, she opened my eyes to so many different things. We laughed at a lot of stuff. She works with a variety of different communities, and she talked about being an artist, but also being a therapist. So if you missed that, you missed something amazing, but you can go back and listen to it. And like always, I create this show to highlight some of the high achievers and sound bombers. I tell you all the time, I know some of the most amazing people on this planet, and I want to share their stories with you. And today, it's no different from any other day. We're going to give you a powerful, impactful, insightful, encouraging, having a courageous conversation. So let's get started. It's bound to happen, sound bombing community, sooner or later. No matter how skilled you are, and no matter how well you've prepared, you are inevitably going to find yourself stuck on a tough problem without a clear path forward. It's tempting in these circumstances to keep your nose down and continue cranking on the problem. But the problem with this method is that you may be digging yourself deeper into an existing rut. So if you're feeling stuck in any certain area of your life, today's show is just for you. So move closer and closer to the speakers. Because joining me in the BalmShelter today is Kenny Weiss. He is a leading personal development speaker and author of Your Journey to Success. As an advanced life coach and founder of the Greatness Movement, he works with some of the most successful entrepreneurs, professional athletes, individuals, and families. He has been featured for his work in Psychology Today, Phoenix Magazine, and Reader's Digest, among other popular publications. Through his own personal struggles, immense growth, and study, Kenny successfully transformed his life and today helps others do the same. His success comes from a self-mastery approach to helping people face their struggles, often in the areas of relationships, careers, addiction, stress, anxiety, depression, fear, and trauma. Through his powerful methods, transformational coaching, and life-changing workshops, Kenny's mission is very simple: to help as many people as possible become the greatest version of themselves. And you all have a treat today because he's going to help you do that. Kenny, thank you for joining me today in the BalmShelter. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Lamar. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Oh, I'm excited about this conversation, Kenny, because we are dealing with let me back up. We're dealing with an international pandemic that have many of us not only just dying from issues around the virus, but we're losing our minds with anxiety and depression because we just don't know what to do. And because of that, I invited you to help me unpack some of the stuff that's going on across the country. But first of all, how are you doing? How is your family doing? How are you making out during this interesting time?
I myself am doing great. I mean, because I tend to look at the world from an emotional perspective, watching all of this play out has been a fascinating laboratory experiment for me. So I haven't, it hasn't caused, myself or my family any real struggles. I find it all really fascinating watching people's, reactions and interpretations to things. And it's really, to me, it's highlighting, is Dr. Robert Bloch, the former head of the American Association of Pediatrics. To me, it's highlighting what he said, which is the single most, the single biggest health crisis facing America today is unaddressed childhood trauma. Because the reaction to this is all that. And you're watching people, whichever side of the fence they believe on, whether they believe it's a hoax or it's, the world's coming to an end, it doesn't matter. The response is the same as overwhelming sense of powerlessness, fear, anxiety, and stress. I mean, stress and anxiety are two different things. People get those things mixed up. But yeah, the emotional reaction and impact on people, that's the real virus that nobody's talking about. And so for me, it's just fascinating to watch, and it proves, one, the science that's out there of how we react emotionally in situations like this, and then everything I put in my book and why everyone's reacting, whichever side of the fence they're on, why they're reacting the way.
And you brought up a word that I typically do a lot of talks and lectures about, that word trauma, which is a serious word. From my research on you and from what my producers shared with me, you didn't grow up in an easy community. There was trauma all around you. From what I know is that you were raised by struggling parents who had 4 children by their early 20s. So someone like you, then how has your childhood experiences shaped your journey and practice to serve others?
It's all of it. And here's one of the biggest struggles that people don't realize is every single one of us has been through massive childhood trauma, yet over 80% of people that I talk to is, what, trauma? No, my childhood was perfect. Everything was fine. And I'm like, okay, let me ask 2 questions. And to this day, no one's ever been able to get past these questions. In my case, I'll ask the questions in a second, but to give this backdrop, my mom was an alcoholic. My parents were 16 and 18 when they were married, 21 and 23 with 4 kids. My mom became an alcoholic. My father was beat to death as a kid. He never hit us, but he had a lot of rage in him, because as a society, we don't teach how to go back and heal all the pain we've been through. We actually say, don't do it. So my parents, they were in tremendous pain. So, they couldn't be there for themselves, so they couldn't be there for us. And while I have tremendous empathy for what they went through, it's also very loving to hold them accountable that they never took responsibility to heal that. And that's what most parents, they don't take that responsibility. And we as a culture, we don't want to talk about that because it feels like we're blaming our parents. But actually what we're doing is loving our parents, because, see, our parents hurt us because no one gave them a voice to deal with the pain they went through. It's all learned behavior. And so when we don't hold our parents accountable and responsible, we're actually robbing the child inside of them that was hurt, because the mistakes they make are all learned behaviors from childhood. And so if we truly loved our parents, wouldn't we want to give that broken child inside of them a voice? And so we have this whole culture of, oh, parents are perfect and never challenge parents. Well, we're actually creating a barrier to love and true intimacy. And let me get to the two questions, and this will prove for anyone, and this is going to be hard for people. This show will be hard because they're going to face some truths they don't want to see about themselves, but this is why they're stuck and struggling. The first question is this: at any time when you were a child and you felt angry, sad, or scared at anything your parents did or said, in that moment, could you have a discussion with them? Could you share your thoughts and feelings? Well, of course not. What did every parent say? Get in your room. I don't want to hear it. Right?
Stay in your place.
Exactly.
Being unseen and unheard, all ran rampant in many communities. Correct.
Exactly. Now, the second question is this: do you have any type of secret from your parents? Anything you've done, anything you believe, anything at all? Well, we all do. Well, both of those show you've been through horrific trauma. And here's why. We have two needs as a species. The first one is attachment. If we don't physically and emotionally attach to another human being, we will literally die. The studies show that. The second thing we need is the pursuit of our authenticity, our authentic power, the true person we really are, and what we as an individual are meant to become and express in the world, what I call our greatness. Well, what do those two questions show? If I speak my truth, if I let my person out, who I am as a person, and want to have a discussion, what was I told? Who you are as a person is bad and wrong. You can't speak. They shut you down. You've been rejected and denied your true authenticity, who you are as a person. What does the second question show? The secret. If my parents found out who I really was, the person that I am, what would happen? I'd be rejected. That is horrific abandonment. And so what develops from that is what I call the worst day cycle. So you don't have to go through what I went through in my childhood. Just a moment like that of not being able to express who you are, or feeling as though you can't even share your life experiences because your parents might reject you. That creates the whole cycle I talk about in my book. And so all of us are living in personalities, because in that moment we develop a maladaptive coping skill, a maladaptive, what I call a false persona. We become something to get attachment. We will drop who we are as a person because my life depends on it. So I will sequester and shut down my authenticity and do whatever I can to get mom and dad to love me. Well, that develops, personalities. But that's not our person. And so the reason either side, like both sides of this COVID dynamic, they're both stuck in trauma. Neither one knows it, and they're both blaming the other side. But all they're exposing to me is what their childhood was like. And so anyone, if your business isn't working, your relationship isn't working, friendship, I don't care what it is. All you're ever showing me is the unhealed pain from your childhood, the worst day cycle that you're stuck in. And you keep repeating against yourself only because nobody's shown you how. Well, one, you're not aware of it. And two, nobody's shown you how to get out of it. Well, that was my life story. And so, like everybody, for 30 years, I was chasing it, going to counselors. I went to all the gurus that we all know their names, the big names, all the events. And I got better. I learned some things, but I could never get over the hump. And what I realized is nobody was willing to go here. This is the answer. And it's backed by science, not just opinion. And this is what allowed me to overcome suicide, all these different things, addictions, and all the struggles I had in my life, is I finally got to the solution, because I just go deeper than anybody that I've come across, other than possibly Gabor Mate, but he doesn't give you the solution. He and I, he describes the problem, backed by the science, just like I do, but he doesn't give you solutions. Everyone else, I haven't seen anyone else be willing to go there, and that's why we're all struggling.
So
that's why I've taken this on.
So let's go through some of the steps that you've taken,
Sure.
for your healing to take place, then for you to then teach these strategies to other people. So you're like me, you're on stages, you're writing, you're talking, but what are some very specific strategies that you use that you employ on a day-to-day basis so you then don't revert back to that behavior that you picked up at a very young age? And then how are you then helping your audience members and your clients to do the exact same thing?
Well, it's the point is, and that's why Journey's in the title of my book. I don't sell 3-day adrenaline weekend events like most people who've turned your life around, because while you're going to learn some things and you're going to have an incredible emotional experience, you're not going to turn your life around. Change doesn't happen that way. And overcoming these traumas takes, and these personalities, false personas we've developed, takes time. And so there's, where I am in that journey is much different than somebody who's just starting out. So instead of telling you what I don't mind telling you. For me, it's all about denial work. When you get to this stage of the process, I wake up each and every day and I go, where am I in denial? Because that's the single greatest killer on this planet today, and nobody's talking about it. We are all in massive, massive denial, and we don't know that. And my next book will show that, and how everybody literally doesn't even know who they are. They're in complete denial of who they are, and I can prove it and show it. But someone at the beginning of the process, they don't even want to hear that word. Like most people listening to your show have probably tuned out. They're like, I ain't going there. And that,
well, we want to bring them back. but I do agree.
Experience.
Isn't that interesting?
They're like, because of denial.
Because of denial.
Yeah. So I know who I am. This is baloney. I didn't go through. That denial will shut them off from the solution.
So Kenny, they're with you when you're talking about all your stuff. They're with you. But then when you say, let's turn it back on you, then they're like, we're not talking about me. Let's talk about somebody. Yeah. You're right. I always say denial is not a river in Africa. It is real. The great Frantz Fanon, the African philosopher, said, every night, Kenny, before you go to sleep, ask yourself these 3 questions. Who am I? Am I who I say I am? And am I all I ought to be? Those 3 questions. And you kept saying they don't know who they are. But another scholar said, after you ask yourself those 3 questions, Kenny, then go to create another one. And that last one is, did I lie along the way? And that's what you're talking about. That denial, if we can get people to say that this is where I am, and it's okay that I'm here, but then I need to sort of move forward. So then how do you then do that in your work?
Yeah, the denial process is a long process, because it took me years of intense. I finally found a counselor who was gifted, and over a 10-year period, I probably spent 7 full years working with him. And he was the one who first saw my gift at what I do. And it's taken a long time for me to see the inner workings of how all this goes, because denial, admitting who we are is a very difficult process. And the first step for someone new to, all of this information is a massive awareness. And it really starts with one. The difficulty is going to be admitting that your childhood is the sole reason for any struggle anywhere in your life. I don't care what it is. Your health, the science is overwhelming. The adverse childhood experience study shows that. Your health, your health conditions are a direct result of unaddressed trauma. That is overwhelmingly proven, but the medical community, because they're run by drug companies, doesn't want to admit it. But the science, they've shown that for years. Your health, your career, your family, everything, it all goes back to childhood trauma. Nothing else. And that has to be addressed. Well, I shouldn't say nothing else. There could be later trauma that has then exacerbated it. So I need to correct the way I said that. That's the first step. And then it's for most people, because it's about 70% of the population doesn't feel. And what people don't realize is, it's another problem in this industry. Everyone wants to tell you to think different or think positive. For the most part, it's a complete waste of time, because we feel before we ever think. We literally are constantly emoting subconsciously, and all of that trauma from our childhood, we're having feelings which generate our thoughts. And so, I show in my book and all the different studies, positive thinking isn't very effective. You need to shift the way you feel. Well, that's deep trauma work. So here's a quick suggestion for those new in the process is go to Google, type in feelings list. And for the next 2 weeks, keep that with you and make check marks. because most people, like I said, 70% of the population doesn't even feel. And here's how you'll ask them, so what do you feel? And they'll go, well, okay. And, I went to the boss yesterday, and they'll start telling you facts. And you go, but what do you feel? And they will say, I don't know. So you have to learn to start getting, because we become what we feel, not what we think. That's a misnomer. Like I said, our thoughts are a byproduct of what we feel. And so until we become an expert in what we feel, we can't really even start the denial process or the trauma process or recovery process. And so, like, the initial step is print off that feelings list, keep it with you, and start paying attention. And you're going to see recurring feelings driving the thought, which then created the behavior. And you'll see it over and over and over. So the first beginning stages of this is a massive, massive awareness process. That's the first place to start.
So you wrote a book called Your Journey to Success. Now,
Yes.
there's a lot of conversation about the definition of success. I don't even want to go there, Kenny, with the whole concept of success. But I want you to share with my sound bombing community is what should we ask ourselves about failure, and what have you learned about failure?
Well, I do want to touch on success because I was developing.
It's your time. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I screwed up. I would have never used that word because I'm not a fan of success.
Go ahead.
Success is an outward process. It's always determined by whether I have the trophy wife or husband, the bank account, the corner office. So we all pursue success, which is an external validation that we attempt to use to soothe internal pain that hasn't been dealt with. And that's why so many so-called successful people blow up their lives and get the trophy and all that stuff and win the award and tell you they're empty inside, because success is an attempt to soothe tremendous inward dysfunction. And so I'm not a fan of success. I'm a big fan of people achieving things and having everything they want. But what I pursue is greatness. And greatness is about an internal process of going and becoming an expert in the pain that we've suffered, so that no matter where we are along that success process, like, I want everyone to have as much as they want, but whether we have it or not, we're at peace with ourselves. That's greatness. I promote greatness. And had I pieced that together when I came with the book, I would have had that as the title, not success. Because again, success is just, we're trying to fill an inward hole with outward things. So, but getting back to failure, as I say in the book, another misnomer is the thought of a fear of failure. It's absolutely not possible. Nobody on this planet has ever feared failure. Everyone says they do, but in one quick example I can show you, it is humanly not possible for us to fear failure. What we fear is success or pursuing our greatness. And let me prove it to you. We have all had the experience of laying in bed, or it's at night before we go to bed, and we're sitting there thinking about, I need to send an email. I need to buy flowers for my wife. I need to do A, B, C, and D, and my life will get better, right? We know exactly what we need to do. And what comes up? I just don't feel like it, right? Isn't that what always stops everyone from pursuing what they want? They'll think, I need to go do this, this, and this, but that seems too big. I don't know how to do it. And they don't do it. Well, right in that moment, they chose failure. They're not afraid of it. They love it. They do it every day, all day long, that feeling. And did you hear? It's a feeling. That's why you have to shift the way you feel, not the way you think, because that feeling is actually a trauma feeling from childhood. And that's where I'd have to get really deep into how the worst day cycle works. And what that is you don't want to let go of the traumatic experience you went through. You're actually using it as false power to stay stuck and stay the victim. And that's why it's absolutely impossible for a human to feel failure. We choose it all day, every day. Our greatest fear is to choose our greatness, is our fear of success. So it's just not possible to fear failure.
So, Kenny, what might you say to a friend who is compromising their health in order to get started, who has taken on too many activities and now is overstressed and not doing well at all? or someone who has devoted themselves obsessively to only one activity in the single-minded pursuit of excellence, or who is excelling at what they do but seems to experience no joy in life? What would you say to a person like that?
Well, that tells me they weren't allowed to express their true authenticity as a child. They were unable to say no. And so they have no ability to perform self-care, to value themselves. So they're driving themselves into the ground against themselves because they're looking for that outside validation to fill that hole. Well, you can't fill it outside of yourself. And so until you can learn how to say no and make yourself a priority, you'll continue that cycle and you'll keep destroying yourself. And so what that tells me is most likely in childhood, they were made to take care of other people. And now they're reliving that trauma against themselves. They won't take care of themselves because they're serving something outside of themselves. It's the cycle. That's all we ever do is we just relive when the traumatic moments happen in we just relive them against ourselves, because what happens in childhood, that secret or that question, we lost our inherent power in that moment. It was taken from us. So what we do as an adult is we then choose to relive it against ourselves because at least I chose it. So I have a whole chapter in my book. Your book tells, whatever your career is, it tells me what your childhood trauma was. It all correlates. I use the concept of a 3D movie. Have you ever watched a 3D movie without the glasses?
Yeah, indeed I have.
Yeah, the colors are
Take them off and put
distorted
it
and
back
everything.
on. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of know what's going on because you've watched a movie before. Well, that's literally how all of us live our life. We've watched our parents. We kind of know what's going on, but things just don't quite make sense. What people don't realize is literally every single choice we ever make, our friends, our hobbies, our careers, our relationships, all of it. As an adult, all we are ever doing is reliving our trauma right back in front of our face, screaming back at us the 4 stages of the cycle: the trauma, the fear, the shame, and the denial that we're stuck in and we refuse to address and ultimately refuse to forgive ourselves for. We're reliving that trauma against ourselves, screaming at us that we need to go address this. But the reason we don't see it and understand it is nobody's ever given us the glasses to understand it. Well, I discovered the glasses. And so when you read my book or seminars or work with me, you go, oh my God, no wonder I keep ending up with this wife or this job, or like you said, I keep destroying myself, pursuing this new career, all this stuff. You'll see, oh my God, this is what it is. I had no clue.
So Kenny, I think I got the right glasses about 2 weeks ago. I won't talk about the person who I sat down with, who is a therapist in her own right, and she shared some things about my childhood, and I believe that all the time. I love Tom Belew's work. I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Belew's work, but Tom Belew's on Impact Theory. He always wears his shirt that says "It's my fault," and it always starts in childhood. And he was probably one of the first people that I heard say that, but I believe that without any supporting documents and things like that. But when I sat down with this person a couple of days ago and she shared some things about my childhood that really resonated with me, it was very, very eye-opening, and it really, really made me think about some things.
Yeah, it is for everybody. But think of our culture. All spirituality is honor the father and mother. Like, you're not allowed to challenge them. Our whole society is, we can never question our parents. Now, I'm not advocating we, throw our parents under the bus and say we hate them, or, that's not what I'm saying, because they're just doing what was taught to them. And so you can only do what you know. So they're not to blame, but they are responsible, because if you're an adult, and think of how we all have kids. We have kids because we want a mini me. It has nothing to do with the child. Like, think of it. We go to school for 16, 20 years, and depending on your specialty, before we can treat people, like in the case of you, a doctor. Yet we'll just go have a kid and won't take a single class. The most complex, difficult thing we will ever do in life. And you even mentioned to somebody that they should go learn how to be a parent, and the denial, the massive wall, and oh my God, no. What do you mean my parents were awful? Well, How could they not be? I mean, we're all human, but so, I mean, look at it. We've had absolutely no education on how to be a parent. And even if we spent our whole lives becoming an expert in it, we're human, so we'll make mistakes. Yet people say my parents were perfect. How? Do you see how ludicrous that statement is? But that's how most of the population believes. Like, they'll defend their parents to death. The culture has put this intransigent, position in place. Well, it's robbing all of us of our greatness. It's completely destroying everybody. It all goes back to that. Well, I want to break that down, not because I want to disparage parents. I want to love parents because they were hurt too. And that's why they made the mistakes with you, not because they're bad people, but you can only do what you know. And as you know better, you can do better. Well, isn't that what we do with everything else in life? We try and know more. Why won't we do it about this? That stigma and that bias, that's heartbreaking to me. I want to make that an invitation. Let's all, once we become an adult, let's go do the work. Our lives will be better. I mean, the studies show it.
And this show is about doing the work, and we want to sort of get to some of those solutions. And you've been providing solutions throughout, and that's what I really, really appreciate. Your direction, and that's why I wanted you here. So, Kenny, what is the number one thing that if I started doing it right now would have the biggest positive impact on my life?
For almost everybody, one of the most difficult things to do, but what really has the biggest impact is learning to say no. Because think of what childhood was. We had to say yes to everything, right? We had to do whatever they wanted. Our life depended on it. Remember, attachment and our whole life depended on it. We had to say yes. And then we have a culture that has taught us through movies and books and everything, like especially relationships, religion too. If you love somebody, do things for other people. Always say yes. That's the most destructive, manipulative thing you can ever say to anyone. And here's the proof. If you have ever said anything like, and this is why most divorces happen. Think about it. Your friends who've divorced, what do they say? I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I had sex when he wanted to, and he wouldn't even take out the garbage. It's always about, I did A, B, C, and D, and they wouldn't do Y. And it drove me crazy that they wouldn't do Y when I was doing all of this for them. Well, you know what that means? It means you used A, B, C, and D to manipulate Y. You didn't want to do them. You were doing them because you felt compelled from childhood and everything else of, if I'm kind and loving, I have to do this for somebody. But yet, if it was freely given, you'd never bring it up again. You'd have absolutely no resentment. Well, every relationship on this planet breaks up because people go, well, they wouldn't give it back to me. Well, that tells me you needed to say no. And so I have to teach every client, for the first week, everything you like, even things you like, I want you to say no to it. And then I want you to go off and think about it. And here's what you do, is you make a list. What are my needs and wants? And there's a difference between those. What are my morals and values? What's negotiable and what's non-negotiable? And before you ever say yes, you think through, does it fit within that? If it doesn't, you better say no. Like, I have a whole chapter in my book on the power of saying no and how to do it. Because here's what happens. When I learn to say no to somebody, what am I expressing? Truth, love. I also know I'm never going to get the knife in the back of, look at all I do for you, and you won't do this for me. And I'm also not going to give the knife to somebody else. And so for most people, the thought of saying no is terrifying. They have tremendous guilt. They feel selfish. And think of why they would. Because in that moment, they actually see their parents' face. They're going to be a bad little kid if they say no. That's what's happening. And so what some people get upset with me of my, one of the ways I teach clients to start saying no is, what happens when you go to a restaurant? What's the first thing the waiter or waitress asks you? If you'd like a glass of water, right? Mm-hmm. Say no. Say, you know what? I'm fine for a nap. Now think about it. And think about it. Do I really want it? And do I want it with ice or not ice? And then when they come back, I've thought about it. Actually, I'd like a glass of water. Now, people that are waiters and waitresses get all pissed off. Oh my God, I can't believe you treat them that way. That's so awful. Well, let's look at that. If somebody is, and this shows childhood trauma, this goes back to the career thing. If somebody has chosen a career as a waiter, and don't tell me I had no other choice. Sure, you could have picked any other job you went through college, but you chose to be a waiter or waitress. You picked a job where you can't say no, where you have to do whatever the customer wants. And now you're upset that they're saying yes to you and no to you and all that stuff. Well, you're just reliving the exact same childhood experience. So don't complain to me that you set up your own self-victimization. In other words, go look at that and realize, oh my God, I became a waitress just so I could experience the same powerlessness I felt with mom. And so my point is take something very simple like a waiter or waitress who asks you for water and say no, and you watch how incredibly powerful you feel. And even those things you like, say no to them first. Go off and think about it. You're going to see a huge shift in your life just from that.
Such a small word with such powerful results. No is sometimes the hardest word to say, but it's also the most necessary. I discovered this. I'm a lover of Dr. King's life and what he's done. And I remember someone calling him a pacifist. Oh, he was weak. He wasn't a revolutionary. And this elder, a guy who worked with Dr. King, said, when Dr. King said no to systems, when he said no to law enforcement, when he said no to segregation, that was a revolutionary move. To say no. I mean, that was more revolutionary than some guns, than some bullets or knives or tanks. Saying no. I mean, you just said, imagine this, a little kid who was, let's just say your daughter or your son who's like 2 years old. You're towering over him or her. He or she is afraid because of your height and your voice, and you can physically hurt this kid by saying or doing anything. And when that kid says no, you sort of shrink to that level of like, how dare you say no? And so you are so right when it comes to people that are working who are overworked. I'm working with a lot of teachers via virtually now, and I'm saying to them, you're gonna have to say no to some things because you have to take your life back. You're in front of a computer screen 8 hours a day, and whoever said that it was harder to teach a class in person didn't know what the hell they were talking about, because sitting in front of a computer screen trying to motivate. Could you imagine this, to motivate some elements, some first, second, third graders? So the power of no is very, very very important. And I'm glad that you said that, because again, somebody's listening and they're rehearsing this. And I like how you said rehearse it with the waiter. I used to tell my students when I was teaching high school, Ken, that I said, when your parents, when they go off on you for whatever reason and they're upset at you, I say to your parents, say, I'm sorry. I said, watch how you disarm them, because they're so used to fighting. They're ready for the fight. They don't really know what to say. So again, when you kick back and say, no, I won't do that. No, I won't do that. No, I won't do that. It does show that you have a level of power when doing that. So I'm glad that you sort of shared that with your clients. I could hear it in your voice, Kenny, and watching your videos and checked out your books on Amazon. But I want to hear from you, man. What do you love most about coaching?
For me, because I've always had the gift of I can just walk in a room and see and feel people's pain and what's keeping them from what they want. And this sounds incredibly arrogant. It's not the way I mean it, but I can see them better than they see themselves. It's like I said, my counselor years ago saw my gift, and even as I was working my own process. And so the most enjoyable part for me is to immediately know exactly what they need to do, but then to also see and feel their trauma history, and to immediately be able to go, okay, wait a minute, with this person, you have to guide them this way. Like I had one client, 16 sessions. She came into my office and we talked about the most innocuous, silly stuff, her workouts and what she was eating. But I immediately saw that the moment she walked in, this woman had been abused by her father. And so she was picking a male coach. She was trying to relive her abuse against herself. She didn't know it, but I saw it right away. And so I'm like, the last thing I will ever do with this woman is exert any type of power or control. I'll just sit here and we'll go wherever she wants. Well, what she was doing was testing. She didn't know this subconsciously. She was testing me. Finally, in that 16th session, she brought up the abuse with her father, and it all came out. I never saw her again. That was it. She got her healing. Now, there's been other people, the second they walk in, like, we go right at it. And so to see that and know that and watch them find it, to watch them reclaim their person, drop their personality and reclaim their, like, because that woman, now she could trust men again. That's why she was in there. Now she made it, said it was all about this other stuff. But then by the time we got to that, she realized what she was in there for. And that, but it took her that long before she could let her wall down. And so allowing them that space to find it on their terms, not because my ego is tied to, well, I fixed them. I didn't fix them. I just knew how they needed to find the solution. And I have that skill set. And then with the things I talk about in my book, I talk about things there's nobody in this industry talking about that are groundbreaking, that help people find themselves. And that, I love that. I love watching, because really what I'm doing, it's incredibly selfish. I have to own it. I'm reliving my own process with my clients. I remember I've been on the journey. And so I get to relive watching it go, seeing the expression in their face when they finally find themselves and go, man, I remember that day. And that whole process, it's.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice. I can feel it when I look at your videos. I want to I thank you for sharing that story with that young lady, but I want to go in a different direction with that.
Sure.
How do you deter the clients from engaging in maladaptive goal setting?
Well, sometimes it depends on the client, because this is one thing I had to learn. The reason we're all struggling and self-victimizing ourselves and using maladaptive coping skills is we're trying to run out of options. We're trying to exhaust, because no one's taught us how not to. Like, my book shows you how not to, but what's been bred into the human species is this self-victimization pattern. We don't have to be that way. I'm showing a new way where we can actually choose to motivate ourselves without pain, but right now it's all we know. And so sometimes the best thing I can do for them is to let them go. In other words, like, I know they're telling me about a choice they're going to make. I already know the result. I know exactly what's going to happen. But if I were to step in and say, look, don't do that because of X, Y, and Z, I'd be playing the role of mom or dad. Well, now all I'm doing is continuing their trauma. I need to let them find the answer on their own. And so I can guide them and but I let them walk into it, because until they have that life experience, they have to feel that experience. I can't tell them. It's just like your kids. How many times do you have kids?
Yes, I do. And
how many times have you told them not to do something, and then after they do it, they come back and go, you know what, Dad, you were right.
Yeah, when they're coming back with their arms broken and fingers.
Yeah,
you were right.
I guess you're right after all, Dad. Well, they need to go self-victimize before they'll find the solution. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be that way, but until they run out of that, they won't be open to hearing a way not to live that way. And so sometimes the best thing I can do is allow them to run out of that and not intervene in the process. And I learned that. My counselor didn't know it, that what he was teaching me. But my second wife, the day we don't have enough time to tell the full story. But the marriage to my second wife, she was a narcissistic sociopath, and I became suicidal. And, there's a whole long story that looking at the time, we don't have time for me to really walk you through it. But I realize now, like, when my counselor was also a therapist or a pastor, and I asked him if he'd marry us, and he goes, let me think about it. And after 3 or 4 days, he came back and he said, I think both of you have a lot more pain you need to go through, but if it's what you want, I'll do it. Now, he was I know he was just exercising good boundaries. But as I discovered how this process works, the worst day cycle, what I realized was this. Had he stopped me or somehow impeded that, I would have never learned how the cycle worked. I would have never run out of. I needed that life experience to break me enough for me to discover everything I've discovered. And that's one of the greatest gifts I got from my counselor that he didn't even know he taught me. And so that's why I can't intervene on somebody, because they may be sending themselves to the one thing that'll break them, where they're finally ready to drop their denial. See, there were aspects of my life I wasn't willing to face. Parts of my trauma, parts of my denial I wouldn't go at. But that relationship almost killed me. And I finally realized I can't avoid this. I can't stay in denial. I can't do this. I've got to go at this trauma. Well, had I not had the relationship, I would have never discovered everything I've done. And so, like I said, for certain clients, the best thing I can do is to let them go have that life experience. So I can't give you a concrete answer. It depends on the client and where they are in their journey. Other clients, it's just giving them, a certain skill or tool. But for others, it's letting them, it's loving them enough right where they are that I don't need to change them so that I can pat myself on the back and go, oh, look how great I am, because it's not about me. It's about their journey and being able to understand what they need in this moment, even if they don't know. And sometimes what they need is for me to let them take that journey. Yeah.
So Kenny, before you get out of here, I want my listeners to come home with you. How can they get in contact with you?
The simplest way is just Google my name, Kenny Weiss, and the spelling is Weiss. My book will pop up on Amazon, my YouTube, my podcast, my Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, tons of free information, tons of videos, tons of stuff that if you don't feel like you're where you know you're capable of, you'll find solutions. And that's the best way. Just Google me and you'll see my website and everything.
Kenny is so cool and laid back. Listen, you all, just Google me, go online. You know how you spell my name. Let me just spell it this way for you. This is Kenny. I love it. But then when you step on stage and when you're consulting, you just explode, man. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate you, brother. Man, we're gonna end on that note, Kenny. I can talk to you forever, and I appreciate you taking my listeners on your personal journey, sharing some stories of some of your clients and people that you met while you were doing your work on yourself and also sort of working on them. One of my favorite parts of sound bombing is what we call the super bomb questions. And these are some rapid fire questions that I like to throw out at some of the guests to see sort of where they are. So sit back in your seat. You ready?
I'm sitting here.
All right, so here we go. What is your favorite word?
Denial.
What's your favorite quote or maybe spiritual Bible verse?
I love, it's been accredited to many people, the Maya Angelou, is one of them. Gosh darn it. Give me 2 seconds and it's in my notes because I love it so much. It's about our deepest fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's a whole long, but that soliloquy, it's so right. Our greatest fear is our greatness, not our inadequacy.
What's your superpower?
My ability to read and understand people.
What's your spirit animal?
When I was younger, it was always an eagle, which I see now is because I didn't want to be a part of life. I wanted to be above it and away from it. It was a defense mechanism. I haven't thought about that in years. Some sort of, I don't know, koala bear, something soft and cuddly and nurturing. I would
soft
say.
And cute and nurturing.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have to think about it, but panda bear, koala, something like, something cute and cuddly.
Well, so this next question goes right in line with this animal. What moves you to tears of joy?
Oh, just pure emotion, vulnerability, brokenness, the honest brokenness. And when you see somebody's soul, whether it's joyful or pain, I just breathe for that.
What brings you to tears of sorrow?
My own pain. Yeah, my own pain.
What's one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made?
Any piece of, or any penny I've ever spent on personal growth and discovering and working on my trauma and how absolutely broken and perfectly imperfect I am.
Kenny, I know that you're busy, but walk us through your morning routine before you start your work.
I always get up, brush my teeth, walk straight downstairs, open up the doors, get the fresh air, grab a cup of coffee, and then go up on my deck and just get present. And I always focus on what I can hear. And then I sit there and I create the feeling of what I want, of who I want to be and what I want in my life. And I just let it wash over me.
I like that. If you were in the Mr. America talent competition, what would your talent be?
Oh, something funny popped in my head. The way I dress, I love to dress really well, but I thought of kind of making fun of myself. I'd probably dress in some 1970s disco pimp outfit. If
you've not seen Kenny Weiss, you got to go to his website, because Kenny will dress to impress with the colors, with the flair. He is definitely telling the truth. Maybe you reliving that childhood. Man, Kenny, it's been great talking to you, man. I could talk to you forever, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
And I also want to thank my engineer, Alec Blanc, my producer, Kimberly Peterson, Supremacy for our theme music, and all of you for listening. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, go to Stitcher, go to iTunes, go to Buzzsprout. We're on all the platforms. Share me with your friends. If you want to know more about me, you can visit drdrlds.com, drlds.com. And as always, believe that something wonderful is about to happen, and some people miss the message because they're too busy looking for the mess. Thanks for tuning in, and do something for someone other than yourself today. You've been listening to Sound Bombing and my amazing guest, Kenny Weiss. Check out all his books and all his materials, and you will be in for a treat. So you've been tuning in. Thank you, and have a great day.